Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I haven't mentioned it lately, but life has seemed pretty dreary here in Seattle lately. I mean, there's the whole abortion and gun shit that I talked about, but regardless of what side of these issues you're on, everyone is dealing with this stuff. The issue that we have here in Seattle that not everyone has to deal with is the crap weather we have on a regular basis. It's shitty a lot of the year, but once April and May hit, things start to get a little bit better. But not this year. I was just sent an infographic that looks at the historic temperatures here in Seattle over time through May. And it showed that we have had temperatures above 70 degrees for a whopping 5 hours in 2022. That's 75 hours less than last year. While these numbers on the infographic sound like a joke, I believe them. And what really sucks is that on top of our shitty weather, we are also the 7th most expensive city to live in the entire country. So if you move here and you buy your 1,200 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom house for $800,000, know that you're also going to get a lot of crappy weather, a lot of homeless people who may legally camp on your sidewalk, and way too many car break-ins. It's a shit deal if you move here. If it weren't for my kid wanting to be with his friends, I'm sure we would consider moving, and then I'd complain about that place. But enough complaining from me. It's time for a thank you. And the good people at Mixie sent me a pretty rad care package featuring their new state-of-the-art hydration backpack that's different than any hydration system you've ever used. Why is it different? Because it has a dual-chamber reservoir that both feed into an easy-to-use system that allows you to control your mixture of both reservoirs with the twist of a hydration dial. You can have electrolytes or caffeine in one compartment and water in the other, and they can be adjusted and shifted on the fly. So there's no need to interrupt your activity, and you can completely switch between your liquids or mix them. It's a game changer for athletes, but what I'm really excited to try is the gin and tonic mix. That's more my style. However you use it, you're gonna be stoked as this thing is engineered to perform while maintaining a look that won't cramp your style, and the function is unmatched. So thanks, Mixie, and if you want to check out Mixie, head on over to mxxyoutdoor.com. Now, it's time to talk about our guest. He's one of the most talented graphic designers I've ever worked with, and he's as humble as they come. Mark Fankhauser has never interviewed for a job in his life. He's only been offered them. From Ride Snowboards to K2 Sports to Line to J Skis to REI and then back to J Skis, Mark has always been so talented that people have just handed him jobs. And I've never met anyone else like that. Nor have I met an artist that can crank out as many incredible, different ideas as fast as Fank. Before we jump into his life and times, I want to ask you to tell a friend about the show. If you read a post on any social media platform that's like, "What's a good podcast? I'm looking for a new one," please comment the Powell movement. I don't ask much from you, but I work hard each week to make sure that you have something awesome to listen to. So please do that for me. It does help the show grow. Also, please support my amazing sponsors who make this show happen. They are Hest, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Elon Skis, and Rollerblade. Now, let's talk with Mark Fankhauser. As you know, this podcast is called The Powell Movement, and that is a poop joke. And while I should ask all my guests about their best poop story, I've never really thought about doing that. But I heard a story about you going to a White Stripes concert in Portland that was pretty funny. And I'm sure you have to remember this one. Can you tell us the story of going to the White Stripes in Portland?
Oh my gosh.
Do you remember?
Vaguely, it's been a long time. Where did you get that information from?
I talked to a bunch of people.
It was super late night, and I don't know what we had for dinner, but we went to the White Stripes concert. Afterwards, we went out to a bar, and it was closing time, and I had to, you can't get back into a bar after the bar closes.
Yeah, 2 o'clock it's
shut down.
We're
on the sidewalk, and we're a ways away from the hotel, and so I was trying to find some place to just take care of business. And where we were, I don't know what was up with Portland, but the alleys were like pristine. I mean, this is like old Portland. This wasn't the Portland it is now, apparently. But I mean, they were all lit up, no trash, no place to hide, nowhere. And it was like emergency mode.
And you're like sweating out of poop?
Yeah, seriously. It was absolute emergency mode. And I was like, you guys, I just got a place. I got to go. And so I ran down the street, found this like corporation. And it was like the darkest place I could find. It was just like not lit up or anything at night. And so there was like this kind of covered kind of courtyard area in front. There was nobody around. And it seemed private, so I dropped trow and did my business. And right when I was kind of finishing up, I heard, "Hey, stop!" And it was like lights out. Immediately took off running. Just boom, pants up. Ah! And I could hear the dude behind me running. And then eventually ended up in like a parking garage. And like just sweating my brains out. But I got away. Yeah, anyway, that was kind of that story. I'm sure everybody's got poop jokes, and that's just...
Yeah, oh no, I've got a story like that as well. Once I had to go really bad. I was in a K2 van, and I dropped my cousin off at his house, and my cousin was like, "Hey, you can come inside and use the bathroom," but I'm like sweating, punching the ceiling of the car, like, "No, I can make it home. It's like 8 minutes away." I make it home. I live on a main road. I get into my lawn. I'm about to get in the house, but I realize it's not going to happen. I live with my mom at the time, and I just pull my pants down in the front lawn of my house. Cars driving by, and I just pooped in the front lawn of my house. So I wanted to embarrass you with a poop story, so I figure I might as well share a poop story of mine. And we live in a city that, like in Portland, where your poop is left on the street there, that has a lot of poop on the streets these days. But when you grew up here in Seattle, was Seattle home, or was it more Kirkland and you stayed over there and didn't make it over to the Seattle side much?
I rarely made it over to Seattle. I mean, I grew up in Woodinville, but it was a long time ago when it was like farmland.
Okay.
It was like pastures. Now it's like wine country and super bougie, but it used to be like the outskirts. You could go out in the woods and build rope swings and ride dirt bikes and stuff. And we would make it closer to Bellevue to go skate because Bellevue had some good parking garages and everything.
Yep.
Rarely make it downtown as a kid.
And you and I are similar ages, so a lot of things in our lives line up. And I know that you're a snowboarder now, but you grew up a passionate skier. And did you come from a ski family?
Not so much ski family. My mom learned to ski when she was like in her 40s. So we all kind of learned at the same time.
Okay.
We were on like a family trip over to Winthrop in the Meadow Valley in eastern Washington. I have an older brother. He's 2 years older. And they were going to take us cross-country skiing with some friends. And got out there. I was probably like seven or 8 at the time. And I remember put the cross-country skis on, and I was like a goose. I was like falling all over the place, and I couldn't stand up. My mom had taken off with the friends. It was my dad and my brother. And it was funny because I was like, this is like one of the first times I remember like just giving the green light to myself to just like swear. I was like telling my dad, "Fucking you, like every swear word I could think of." And they were laughing at me because I couldn't stand up to get them. And they were just out of like pole's reach. And I was swinging I just got madder and madder the more they laughed. And I don't know how it all finished off, but at some point I like must have just got worn out or something and they stopped laughing, but got up and then it was able to like get up to the top of this little peak area on this like, cross country trail. And then we had lunch up there. And on the way down, it was like, this is freaking awesome. Like skiing down the tracks. I mean, you'd fall over every time you came to a corner, but like stand up sledding was like, this is sweet.
Gravity.
So then on the way home from that trip, we stopped by Mission Ridge and they were like, well, let's try downhill. So they got us a lesson. My brother and I tried downhill and I was hooked. And that was like, after that, that's all I wanted to do.
So immediately after that, is it like every weekend you're begging your parents to take you skiing?
Yeah. Back then they had like North Shore Ski School bus. So like my parents, I mean, as a kid, I was like, this is awesome. We get to go. And as an adult that has kids, I'm like, what a blessing that would be now. But as a little kid, it was like my parents would drop us off at the local junior high. And from like 6 a.m., we'd hop on the ski school bus, go up to Snoqualmie or Stevens, whichever year it was, and be gone all day long. They get home at like 7 or 8 at night, totally wiped out. So like they had all day Saturday to themselves to just do whatever they wanted to do.
That's crazy. I wouldn't let my kid go do that for a full Saturday these days. Like if it was, maybe now that he's 12, 13, but it would still be weird to send him up the mountain by himself and see him 12 hours later. But I guess that's an overprotective parent these days. But I guess our parents growing up, they didn't care. They're just like, go do it, Fank. See ya.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, it was like you're chaperoned the whole time you're on the bus all the way up there. And then once you get to the mountain, you're in classes. Yep. And then there's like in classes, there's probably like, I don't know how many extra hours there are after class to dink around. And then you got to be back for lunch, you got to be back for end of the day. And then away you go.
Nice. And then how about skateboarding? I know you came up in the Bones Brigade years, I would think. And did you get into skateboarding when that stuff was happening, like the Animal Chin times?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love watching the movies, but I was like, it's such a nerd. I mean, it's kind of started out like somehow I fell in love with surfing. And I never surfed. I just loved the posters and the magazines and the pictures. But I'd seen some stuff on TV, but I had never done it myself. But I was like the surfiest surf kid that had never surfed. I mean, I had like the fucking haircut, like all the shit. Kind of same with skateboarding. Like was such a poser skating growing up, and then didn't get into it really until kind of the same time I started snowboarding, which was like end of junior high, middle of junior high. Yeah, I was rollerblading for a while.
I heard that. So coming up, it was like you're inline skating, because that's what I'm going to call it, as Rollerblade is the sponsor of the podcast, and that's how I should call it, because that's what it is. And so you go through a phase of that, and like everything that you do, I heard you were really good on your inline skates. And how did that come about? Did you just come up when inline skating was blowing up? You just got a pair and started going to the skate park?
Well, my buddy Brandon, his dad started a skateboard, windsurf shop called Board Sports. And it was like the local spot in Woodinville. I got a job there. Yeah, I was probably like 14 or so. So got a job there. They rented inline skates.
Okay.
Yeah. Then I had a pair and then got into it that way. And it was so fun. We would do like parades. They'd do like a Woodinville parade. And we like had like tow lines behind they had this big jacked up Suburban. And they'd pull us in the parade.
Like the water skiing skaters.
Yeah. But you're only in a parade. You're only going like 2 miles an hour or 1 mile an hour. So it was more like you could walk and be faster than the car. So the tow lines didn't really do anything for you. But we just dinked around behind the car for the most part. But this is like before anybody was riding rails or anything. We were like riding downstairs and going backwards. And
so it's like 96-ish. Like you're getting into it like really early when it's first kind of coming up.
No, this would have been 89-ish.
Oh, wow.
Somewhere in that zone.
Okay. So yeah, you're really, really before. So 89-ish with inline skating. And then with skiing, while the culture of skiing isn't what the culture of snowboarding eventually became, there is a culture to skiing when you're coming up. And you were super into it. Were you watching all the Greg Stump movies and watching Plake, Hattrup, and all those dudes and just blown away by them?
Yeah. When I saw Blizzard of Oz, I was hooked. Like, I don't know the first time I saw it, when it was exactly, but that my life was over after that. I was like 100% a Glen Plake, Scot Schmidt, Hattrup fan. Like, I just worshipped. I like literally collected pictures. This is after the surf stuff went away. All my walls turned into skiing. And it was like, that was all I did.
Did you ever get to see Plake or Hattrup up here skiing at like Ski Acres and follow them around the mountain?
I never did. I mean, I would have loved to, but I would go to like Ski Bonkers, the shows that they were at, and like where they're signing, and Kim Reichhelm, when they were signing autographs, and like I had like a white turtleneck on, and I got them to sign my white turtleneck. It was so dorky, but oh my god, yeah, like there was not an inch of space on my walls. It was all stapled pictures of them, and to the point where there were some photos that had been in magazines that got mislabeled as somebody else, and I knew that was Scot Schmidt. And I'm like, that's BS, that's Scot Schmidt. And I traced it all down because I knew the outfit he's wearing in Chamonix at the time, and it was insane. And then like when I finally got to work with those guys later on, not Scot Schmidt, but Glen Plake and Hattrup, I was like starstruck, speechless sometimes. It was funny.
That's really cool. And what I hear is not only did you have them on your wall, but you had them on your body almost. Like, did you really have a mohawk and would put that up and go ski at the mountain with a mohawk up, or did I was getting bad information?
It wasn't really like a straight up mohawk, like shaved sides. It was more like my long, like I was playing soccer at the time too. It was like long soccer hair. But then I like would squish it up on the side and put it up. It was like a mohawk.
Was it like a homage to Plake, and you would go ski at the mountain looking like Plake and trying to do the tricks that he was doing?
Oh yeah. I was a total dork. I was like a absolute all in, I had like fluorescent jacket and then Rafi ski pants with like the matching fluorescent stripe down the side.
So you were full on in it. If snowboarding hadn't come around, you would still be a hardcore skier, but snowboarding did come around and that's where you went. But the coolest part, or the most interesting part of your childhood that I was able to find out, was it sounds like you were a huge raver, like wearing size 46 pants and like going to raves and Was that Fank growing up?
That was like 1 year. Yeah, that was basically like senior year in high school. There was a solid year there where it was like my buddy Elliot Olson and Casey Savage, Jake Snyder, and me, and we would just go to raves every weekend.
And was it like pacifiers and candy necklaces and tons of hallucinogens and that kind of rave stuff?
Yep, pretty much all that, and then some.
And while it's funny to kind of clown that stuff these days, what kind of effect does that have on your art? I mean, does that kind of create a framework of everything moving forwards, of let's just being super creative and, expanding your mind, and that help with art?
Honestly, I don't think it did at all. Going into it, I kind of thought that would be like a little, the first time you tried the hallucinogen, you're kind of like, maybe this is going to do something like that. Not at all.
Okay.
It didn't change anything. I was already drawing and doing a bunch of stuff before that. And yeah, it definitely changed your perspective on things in general, like the things your mind could do, but it didn't change my art at all.
So you're a raver, but you're in this city where, or you're in Woodinville, but I mean, Seattle in general is a city where everything is cool at that point. When you're in high school, grunge is blowing up, and this whole city is like the most important city in music in the country, it seemed like. And were you a part of that, like going to shows and stuff like that, or are you strictly a rave kid?
Oh my God. The crazy thing is, I was just having this conversation with my wife the other day. It was like, neither of us took advantage of what it was at the time. I feel like I was there in the time, but not in the mindset. The first concert I ever went to was probably like my junior year in high school, like besides rave, like an actual like show. And it was awesome. For some reason at the time, like money was super tight. And I was like, I could actually buy a CD for the same price as going to see a show and have it forever, you know?
Yeah.
The entire experience side of it like missed me completely. Plus the music sounded better on a CD than it did at the show. And I could play it over and over again. So it was like total like logical me just missed out on the entire experience. Going to shows and seeing it live.
Well, what can you do?
Sucks. Yeah.
You can buy a live CD and live with that, I guess. But one thing we haven't really touched on yet is snowboarding. I mean, we've talked about it here and there a little bit, but really, do you remember the first time you see snowboarding?
If you want to go about the very first time, that's the North Shore Ski School bus. Burton was doing like a demo. And they were actually had these bindings where it was almost like ski blades. You know, it was like those bindings, little metal things, but it was on a snowboard. So you could use your ski boots and then just strap in. So you trade your skis in for like an hour or whatever, and then you could go take their snowboard. And tried it, and it took us like an hour to get down Alpine, like up at Ski Acres. Summit Central, yeah. But,
it's Central, yeah.
Tried it then. It was pretty fun. It was a pain. I mean, couldn't do it. And then the next time we rented a board, I rented like a GNU Pharaoh and had like moon boots. I didn't know you needed like actual like structured boots. They were like floppy moon boots, and I put bags inside of them to keep my feet dry. Zero support. I remember like, this is up at Stevens. I remember like sliding down on my ass on Housewives under hogs, like being like, this sucks. I mean, all my first experiences with snowboard were horrible. I built one when it snowed at our house one time, like cut it out of wood, cut a skate deck off in half, put that screwed into the nose, and then put metal for rent signs on the base. And then used like soup cans to make bindings out of.
Okay.
It worked. I got a couple turns in like in this POW up at the high school by our house. And those were like, of my 3 times trying snowboarding for the first time, those were actually the best turns I had.
Okay.
But after that, when I was skiing, it was like when Glen Plake and those guys were like going off in Blizzard of Oz. The only way to get sponsored or anything, unless you were those guys, was to race.
Sure.
And I raced a little bit as a kid, and I was like, this sucks. I just didn't like competitive sports. So I had some friends that were in snowboarding, and they were getting sponsored, and I had skated, and I like skateboarding. So I was like, try snowboarding. You know, they're getting like free product and all this stuff. So I tried snowboarding, and it was super awesome. And I was like, this is great. So I like kind of left skiing a little bit, went to snowboarding. So mostly, like, I guess the answer to the question is like out of lack of opportunity in skiing.
If you wanted to be anything in skiing, you had to race, and it was not the way that you were. You're not wired that way, and snowboarding was freedom. You could do whatever you wanted, and that's the way you were going to go.
Yeah, and you could land all your skate tricks you wanted to land.
Yeah, and it didn't hurt as much.
Because the board strapped your feet, it didn't hurt to fall.
And do you start going to some of the other mountains? Because ground zero for Northwest is up here, Mount Baker. You've got the Mount Baker Hardcore. You've also got like Peter Line and stuff. He's probably up at Ski Acres and all over the place as well. Are you seeing all these people when you go to different places, like the Jeff Fultons and the Craig Kellys and the Peter Lines, and just seeing what snowboarding can be and be like, holy shit, and that makes you want to put more time into it?
Yeah, that was kind of like almost like a byproduct of it. Because my buddy that I skated with all the time from high school, his name is Elliot Olson. I remember when we were kids going down to drop him off at Hood at camp and then coming back. He was sponsored by Nitro.
Okay.
Like that was like the Seth Neary those days. Anyway, with him and Casey Savage, who was sponsored by Movement and a couple other companies, I was riding with those guys, and that's how I ended up meeting like Peter Line and riding with Peter up at like Silver Fir and seeing him do the most insane stuff on like, I mean, you know, the videos of him in the backcountry doing huge stuff are like one thing, but then you see him do these things on like small jumps where you could actually hit the jump and you're like, there's no way I could do that on the small jump. Like
he's doing a 7 off a bump.
Just like the smallest little tiny quarter pot on the side of Silver Fir, and he's doing like switch McTwists. And you're like, what the hell? It's crazy.
Is it one of those things where you're friendly with him?
It's more see him at the mountain and following.
Okay.
Like more just like, you know, you were talking about like if I had ever ridden with like Glen Plake or something, it was like, that was like me riding with Glen Plake, but it's like snowboarding, you know, with Peter Line and shit.
he was just as important, I feel like, at that time in snowboarding. I mean, he was like the biggest shit that was going on. So just being able to go to your local hill and ride with him is pretty insane. I would think it's mind-blowing to a high school kid. And then art-wise in high school, I mean, this is the time when everything's changing. It's like we're just getting email and starting to use email, and anybody older than us doesn't use it. And all the computer programs are starting to come out for art. I think that's when Photoshop and stuff, or maybe there's probably stuff before that people are starting to use. Are you getting into those programs before anybody else really and kind of masterminding the programs like first?
I didn't have Photoshop, Illustrator, any programs until college. Like I didn't have email until college. Like, you know, we read like a Commodore computer.
Yeah.
It was like basically just for typing reports and stuff. It had one of those printers that was like at the holes.
Dot matrix?
Yeah, dot matrix. So even until the end of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do as far as art.
But you were into art, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was like obviously my favorite class in school. That and art was the jam. And growing up, started drawing early as a kid.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things out with Hest, because camping season is here, and if you're like me, the one thing that sucks about camping is the awful sleep you get every night. There's nothing worse than waking up in a fog and knowing you're going to be tired all weekend. Well, you can say goodbye to that, because Hest has reinvented the sleep system, and believe it or not, it's more comfortable than the Westin Heavenly bed I sleep on every night. Think 2 layers of temperature-regulating memory foam at its best, and it comes complete with the water-resistant base and integrated compression straps that make Hest the easy choice to take anywhere. Hest and I are so confident that you will love this mattress that everyone who buys one gets a 100-night money-back guarantee. You can't go wrong with it. To find out more about the best solution for sleep when you are car camping, truck camping, van lifing, truck conversion camping, well, you get it. Head on over to Hest.com. My next sponsor is Rollerblade, and they pretty much invented the sport of inline skating, and it's no surprise that they make the most comfortable, high-performance skates out there. If you're already a skater, check out the fit and finish of the 22 Rollerblade line. It will have you skating further and faster than ever before. If you're a new skater, Rollerblade has you covered with skates that are engineered to keep you comfortable, having fun, and most importantly, in control. To find out more about the 2022 offering, head on over to rollerblade.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, the brand famous for that iconic bottle that kept your grandfather's coffee hot and his water ice cold. Well, Stanley still has that bottle, but they also have everything you're going to need this summer to go camping. Nothing else matches the quality of Stanley, and like your grandpa's water bottle, the camping cookware will last you a lifetime and create the memories that Stanley is proud to be a part of. I'm going to save you 30% on all of your Stanley gear. That's the best deal you're going to find anywhere. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, all lowercase, when you check out, and you'll get the Powell Movement deal. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you start to look at colleges or you're figuring out where to go, Western is a place that's close to Baker, so it makes riding very accessible, and it's probably, you know, you look at it as there's a hub of snowboarding in the Northwest or in the world right here next to me, and I can go to school here. Is that the reason you go there, or is it because they have a good graphic design program? Because I feel like they had a decent one, or they had one before a lot of people had graphic design programs.
Yeah. The fact that it was close to Baker was number one for sure. And then it was just a good school. I didn't want to go to the U. There was actually a couple of things. They didn't have a Greek system, which I did not want to go and like be part of a Greek system. I just kind of wanted, like, I love the idea of like Western was just everybody hangs out together and parties together.
Yep.
There's no elitist, vibe there at all. The school is not based around sports, ball sports, and yeah, it's kind of more educational system. The fact that there was a graphic design program, like we're going there originally, I had no idea there was like a good graphic design program. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I actually thought I was going to be a computer programmer, and that's what it would take to get into computer graphics. Like I literally called it computer graphics back then. Like I just didn't have any idea. And then up at school, like ways into school, I realized that after taking some computer science courses that this was not my calling. Like almost flunking out of those classes. Like literally having to go up to the professor and be like, can you just pass me? I will never take another computer science course in my life. And they passed me. By that time, I was already in the design program and realized what graphic design was. I had no idea what it was. So like in high school, I'd done logos and stuff for some companies, but we didn't have the internet, so you couldn't like search up stuff. I didn't know any designers. I didn't know what it was. I just called it drawing,
Yeah.
Drawing, but you're making letters instead of
pictures. So
I mean, if you made a logo, you were an artist. That was what it
Totally.
was. It wasn't a graphic
Totally.
artist. You're just an artist.
just an artist.
And so it sounds like the biggest thing that happened for you career-wise happened in college. You have a professor that used to teach at a school in Nebraska, and he took a job at Western, and you were in his class. He had a student when he was in Nebraska named Mike Stiskel, and we know him as Stick. And Stick came to one of your classes to talk to everybody. Stick's working at Ride, and he's going to talk to everybody about what he does as a job and just be one of those guest speakers. And I would think that you were super excited for him to be there, but it sounds like you were the dude with the beanie over his eyes sleeping in the back of the classroom. Do you remember that at all?
I remember this 100%, and I have heard the story told. There's absolutely no way I was that kid. I think the Sticks probably told this story because I was like attentive. It's one of the only ones I went to. I was like so excited to hear this speech. And I think I had my hat pulled down so far that my eyes were probably just, like barely, that was just the way I wore my hat. But no, I was not snoozing. I was super into it, listened to every word. Yeah, and then Kent Smith, who was so awesome, he was our professor. After class, he said Sticks had mentioned he was looking for some snowboard graphics, and Kent told him to come and check out my stuff. So I showed him my stuff after class, and he's like, well, let me go show this to the reps, which I had no idea what any of this stuff meant. But he's like, let me go show this to the reps, and we'll get back to you. So he went and showed these little bugs I'd been working on to the rep force, and then they took him down to Hood summer camp with the pros that were riding, and they all voted, and they're like, let's make these the half pipe graphics, because they were going to make them the kid graphics. And that was my first job, doing the Ride Zero, which was a half pipe board at the time. There were just these bugs that were on there.
So you're in school for this when you get kind of hired to do some freelance? That has to be the coolest thing of your entire life, is like, holy shit, I'm going to get paid to do something in snowboarding, and I'm like just a college kid with no direction in life.
Oh, it was amazing. It was the coolest thing ever. And then that turned into another project, and then I ended up paying for, partially for school, which was good. And just to even do anything in the snowboard or ski industry at that point I was so stoked. That was like dream come true, 100%.
And it sounds like the biggest job that he gives you is to comp some stuff for the Ride Timeless, which is like their franchise series of boards. There's like 7 boards in the line, and you had been working on different masks, and that's what you pitch or you deliver with the art. And when you deliver art of all your masks to Stick and you're like, here you go, and it's a big project, is it nerve-wracking to you as being like, just out of college or right about to finish college, and you're handing in this art and you're hoping it's going to be great? Are you worried that the reps and Stick will like it or won't like it, or you just know it's awesome already?
There were so many boards. I feel like there was 9 different boards. And back in the day, it wasn't tip-to-tail graphics. It wasn't like you do one graphic and it covers every board. It was like each model was distinct, its own graphic. Yeah. It wasn't tip-to-tail graphic. It was only between your bindings, essentially. But still, each one was a lot of work. And I didn't have any idea that the Timeless was at the time, it was their flagship model. I was just like, holy shit, this is a lot of boards to do. And, knowing what I was making on the Zeros, I was like, well, that was only 4 boards. This is more than double that. This is a shit ton of money. And I'm doing it for a snowboard company. It was more just that vibe. I had no pressure whatsoever other than just timelines and trying to get it done on time. After hours, listening to fucking techno with my headphones on.
It's just exciting being able to create something in snowboarding. And then when you first see your products out in the public, is that just a mind-blowing thing where you see a pro rider riding one of the boards that you created?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. It still kind of is, but it really was then.
Yeah.
You're just oh my gosh. Now there's actually, at this point in my career, there's so many out there that I see that are like, oh, that was so bad. Yeah. What was I thinking? Oh my God, totally different era, but life goes on.
And by the time you graduate, you're living at home. I think home's in Kirkland at that point, and you're a hired gun for Ride, and they're offering you a full-time job. Is that a no-brainer? Yes, I'm in, 100%?
Actually, at that point, I was still up at college. I was trying to get a minor in business.
Okay.
So this is kind of a weird part of the story, but I did not graduate from Western. Okay. I got all the credits I needed to graduate in design, but I was focusing on getting a minor in business. And Sticks and Maeve called up in the middle of summer, it would have been 98. And we were out inner tubing up the river up by Deming. And Sticks called. He said, call me at 3 p.m. I'm trying to remember the name of the little town. It was a tiny little town. But yeah, it was one of those old school blue phone booths.
Yep.
I pulled over before we went and called the number, and they're offered me the job. He put me on the phone with Scott Mavis, and was like, well, what do you think? Do you want to take the job? And I was like, are you fucking kidding? Yes. So
long story short is that in design, resume doesn't mean anything. It's like my parents would probably be super bummed because they paid for a ton of my college and then to not get the actual paper that says you got a degree. But in design, you don't need a degree.
Yeah, right.
It's more about your portfolio. And that was the beginnings of really getting my portfolio together. And it was going to be like $60 for a cap and gown thing to like, do the walk. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't got that money right now. So it seems so trivial to not have finished, but yeah, I have all the credits to get the actual piece of paper for design. I don't know if they still count anymore. Now it's probably a totally different story, but I was halfway through my minor in business and just said, bag it.
And you took a great job. When you get hired on at Ride, it's like a transitional time for the brand, I feel like. I think Bob Hall, he was CEO or he's on his way out, and Robert Markovich was in charge at Ride. Now, Robert, he was an absolute control freak when he was at K2, and a lot of us remember him as a complete asshole. Although I've met with him after he was at K2 and he was super awesome, but when he was in control of that company, he ruled with an iron fist and he was a total jerk. But this is a different time in that dude's life, and he was really cool, and he loved you and your talent, and he bought you a car called Sweet Pea. What's the story behind Sweet Pea?
Well, Sticks had been giving me a ride. I lived in Redmond at that point, and Ride was out in Fall City, so that's like, I don't know how many miles it is, 20 miles or something. And Sticks was driving from Issaquah to pick me up in Redmond and then take me out to Fall City and then drop me off in the day because I didn't have a car yet. So this is, I don't know how long, this wasn't very long, but I was like, I need to get a car, but I don't have money, to put down or whatever for a car. So Sticks arranged with Markovich to actually buy me a car on the company dollar, and then I would pay the company back. So it was like a little green Honda Accord. It was fucking awesome. Yeah, it was $5,000 and I paid him back in no time.
And it's one of those things where Robert Markovich has always had an affinity for Mark Fankhauser. And I won't say that you were teacher's pet later on in life, but he always really loved you for great reason. I mean, you made his life easy with all the work that you did. But it started early on, and this is a guy that a lot of people, if you went into a room of 200 people at K2 and said, what do you think of this guy? 195 of them would say, fuck that guy. But you were on Team Robert, I would think, right? Because he always had your back.
Yeah, he absolutely had my back. In fact, there was a good chunk of time when I first started at Ride that we couldn't pay the bills. And I didn't know this. I was like fresh. I was green out of school. But like we had trash piling up in front of the facility in Preston because we couldn't pay to have the trash taken out. So there was like giant dumpsters and just trash piling up. And they weren't paying the utilities. But I remember like talking to Alex Draper. And I think I said something about Robert. And Alex is like, dude, are you kidding me? He's paying your salary on his personal credit card. And I was like, holy shit, that's fucking nuts. I think it was from that moment I was at a whole different perspective. Anyway, honestly, he's always been ridiculously good to me. And I actually just talked to him today, randomly.
But you can see where I'm coming from, where many people don't have the same opinion as you do. And rightfully so, many people didn't have Robert in their corner. Because if he wasn't in your corner, he wasn't the nicest guy in the world, unfortunately. But I've talked to him after the fact of K2, and he's great now. So it's like, you want a CEO to rule with an iron fist and make people listen and hate him? He's the great guy for it. But he's also going to make sure that he picks his favorites and that they're taken care of. You were a favorite, and no one had anything bad to say about you being a favorite, but it was just obvious that like Fank was a golden child here. And it was all based on you're like the humblest and hardest worker who delivers the best work. So it was like no one had any problem with it. But getting back to when you started, your timing at Ride was kind of perfect because like we said, the computer programs were just developing and you're learning them in college. And when you get in-house at Ride, is it like you have the firmest grasp on all of the computer programs because those other guys really haven't had teachers teaching them how to use it? So you're like not only young and creative, but then you also know the computer aspect of it all?
Well, Sticks was super versed in it, and he and I were the only ones that worked, with Photoshop Illustrator.
Yep.
I didn't have like catalog layout experience like he did, and at that point it was all in Quark.
Yeah.
It was like way back before InDesign.
Yeah.
And then later on it went to InDesign, but yeah, I had no experience in Quark, and Sticks was like the master at that shit. So we worked together until late nights to get the first catalogs done, because before that they were outsourcing all the catalogs. I knew what I knew well, and Sticks knew what he knew well, and we just like bounced off each other for our part of the catalog.
And at Ride, the cool factor was undeniable. From the employees in the building to the athletes, everyone around the brand seemed to just ooze cool and just get it within the snowboarding world. What was the vibe at Ride like?
Well, I think the cool was before I showed up. The cool was there like way before I showed up. And then when Bob Hall took over, I think the cool like exited the building. And then we were like picking up the pieces essentially. So I don't know. But when we got bought by K2, I could see why everybody at K2 hated Robert kind of at that point, because I think Ride was internally, we were looked at like the redhead stepchild. People weren't stoked on us, and we felt that vibe coming in, and we were like, well, fuck it. We're just going to be, we're going to be, and not worry about it. And in one way, we were looked at down upon. In another way, we were like kind of coveted because we were bringing in money and like a kind of a fresh vibe. And definitely later on, it was like a competitive nature with the internal K2 people.
Yep.
And that made everybody better, which was awesome. I mean, I've met some of my best friends at K2, which is sweet.
But when you're in Ride, because, you're in Preston, Washington, it's a different brand than K2 at that point. And really, when you say Preston, there was Preston Bindings. And if you wrote a Preston Binding, it was a Ride brand based out of Preston, Washington. And you guys got really creative and looked at the sign and it's like, Preston, we'll make the binding that. What other brands were under the Ride umbrella?
Oh, God. So at that point, like one brand I was super stoked on, like history-wise, was SMP. And the first things I bought, I remember like my first Pro Form, I got an SMP belt. It just broke like 2 years ago. I literally wore it like every single day. It was black and had like whole like circles all the way around it. Anyway, it finally broke after like 20 years or whatever. And so I finally got a new belt. But that was my first purchase at Ride. What else was under there? It was Ride. It was 5150.
Moro, were they part of it? Or was that a separate purchase for K2?
Honestly, I can't remember. It was so Liquid was in there for sure. I think Moro was in there. God, I don't know. Honestly.
Okay. Well, your headquarters were about 30 minutes from the summit, and that would mean you guys could ride all the time. Was it one of those places when you worked at Ride in Fall City that you guys are going up to the mountain like as a crew almost daily and just shredding and like it's all about snowboarding?
You'd think so. It was less that and more like, hey, we're going to go up on Wednesday night. Like I think there was like a crew that went up on Wednesday nights. And then if it was like a crazy dump, there was definitely a hardcore crew that was going up individually, like after hours or whatever. But it wasn't as much as you'd think, I guess.
Yeah, I guess sometimes when you work in the business, it makes it tough to go after work every night, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's like you think before you get the job, like, I'm going to work all day and I'm going to ride all night and it's going to be amazing. But then after your 8-hour day, you realize you need to have a little bit of life outside of it, and that kind of happens. But it's not just Ride here in the Pacific Northwest. You've got LibTech, you've got Canoe, all the Mervin brands. You've got K2. And was there any camaraderie between the brands? Like, did the Ride guys hang out with the LibTech guys at all, or was it each to their own?
Back then, I didn't really know anybody else from other brands. It was kind of each to their own. You'd meet people down at trade shows and stuff. But like, I think for Styx and me, we had our mindset on just trying to bring Ride up to be as best as it could be. Aluminum bindings, best as it could be. And our biggest competitor in our brand was Burton, and we did everything against Burton. We just want to be number two. We're number two because we try harder. Like Avis. That was like our mindset. But I've always loved Mervin stuff. I think those guys are freaking rad.
You had mentioned the K2 acquisition, but when you're at Ride and you guys are still in Fall City, are there rumors going around the building talking about being acquired by K2? And what are people saying about that? Or is it something that you just hear?
You kind of hear it, and then I was so green. I didn't know what it was going to mean. I thought maybe, if K2's acquire us, they're going to fire us all. And I didn't know how, buying companies work, that they kind of keep a lot of people and then some people fall out, especially when they move out to Vashon eventually, which initially it wasn't like guaranteed we're moving out to Vashon. It was like, keep the facility and you can work from there.
That's all lies with acquisitions, though. They tell you that just to make you feel good. And then they're like, 2 years later, they're like, actually, you're going to have to go commute and take a boat to work.
The crazy thing with Styx was like, at that point, I was living in Redmond. I would meet him in Issaquah, and then we'd commute all the way out to Vashon and then all the way back at the end of the day. It was like an hour and a half commute each way. And we did that for 2 years, something like that. It was crazy.
It's insane. When K2 eventually does buy Ride, you've heard about it a little bit in the building, but I wouldn't think people are psyched. Is everybody worried? Are they pissed? Or they feel like they've just gone corporate? What's the vibe within that building? Because you guys are all the cool guys in snowboarding at that point, I feel like. You say that when Bob Hall moved in or whatever, that some of the cool left. But there are still a lot of cool people associated with that brand that I'm sure were pretty bummed on a corporate acquisition.
Yeah. Well, I think for the most part, like a lot of people internally were kind of stoked because finally there was a future. Before that, the future was totally uncertain. Like, it was going downhill. We were scraping by every year to make ends meet. Couldn't even take out the trash. And then finally it was like, oh my God, we're going to have money to do stuff. We're going to have this, and that. But it was like, you're going to, the commute's going to fucking suck. And we did lose some people. Our first hire was Gabe Goldman. And he was a super talented designer.
I know him.
Yeah.
He's around here, right?
Yeah, he's a West Seattle dude.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he wouldn't move out to Vashon, or wouldn't do the commute to Vashon, so he left. So we had him for like a year or two, and then that was it.
What was the integration like when you guys finally have to move over to Vashon? You had some attrition, you lost some people, but are people genuinely stoked to be in business and have some capital behind them? Or is it kind of like, fuck, we're part of this corporate brand? Because, you know, I mean, like you might have been worried about staying afloat, but once you realize you are going to stay afloat, then there's other things to complain about because everybody's always looking for something to complain about, I feel like.
Yeah, we were good complainers. I think we were like the thorn in the side, but it was like, what are they going to do to us? We just kept pushing the line and pushing the line. We were in this area called the North Building. There's 2 different buildings on Vashon.
Yeah.
We were with like Morrow. And those guys felt the same thing we did. And I remember like talking to Rebecca, and she was awesome. She was like, basically like, your star will pass. Like, you're the new guys right now, but wait till they acquire a new company and then you'll be like us. Because at one point they were like we were earlier on, apparently.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and while ski season is coming to a close, Elan Skis is still supporting the show because they know how important the history of this sport is. What's important to me is that you do your part by checking out Elan's site, looking at their products, and demoing a pair next season. Once you do try an Elan ski, you'll end up buying that pair as the quality and performance of Elan's products is unmatched. I'm sure you've started to see more and more Elan skis at your local hill, and the reason is because they are more fun and they're going to make you a better skier. To find out more about everything Elan and their skis, head on over to elanskis.com. Next up, it's Peter Glen Ski and Sports, and Peter Glen has not only been getting you out on your adventures for over 60 years via their retail storefronts, they also have a robust online business, and they always have a fun promotion going on Instagram. This week, Peter Glen is teaming up with Hoka to give away a pair of the new Hoka Bondi 7s to 2 lucky winners. Enjoy the all-day comfort Hoka is known for, thanks to its famous early-stage meta rocker that smooths the transition from heel strike to toe-off. Entry in this contest is easy. First, go to Peter Glen Sports on Instagram and follow Peter Glen Sports and Hoka. Second, like the giveaway post from Hoka. Third, tag 2 friends in the comments. It's that easy. The giveaway ends on June 17th, and the winner will be announced then. Good luck. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They've been brewing the best beer in the Pacific Northwest since 2006, and they've been banging the drum about drinking 10 Barrel outside ever since. But they don't just go outside and drink. They support athletes like skiers Kate Zelef and Lucas Walks, and snowboarder Ben Ferguson, mountain biker Carson Storch, and many, many more. And they don't just pay these people. They give them beer, and they create content around them for all of us to enjoy. If that's not enough, 10 Barrel's Clean Line Seltzer has the perfect bubble recipe and flavors, and their cocktails in a can pack a punch. I love them. To find out more about 10 Barrel, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. Well, the Morrow crew was very, very bitter. I remember being on the boat when I was first hired on for skate, and they were like, would say things to me like, oh, you're one of those fucking skate guys. And but like, I was kind of like, you don't even know me. Like, I've been snowboarding for like a decade, and you want to call me a skate guy because I'm hired on to skate, but I've bought your fucking products, which I'll never buy again because it's Sports Authority shit, which I didn't tell them, but that's what it was at that point. But either way, they were very, very bitter. And this is about the time that you came onto my radar. I was living in Vail at about 98, 99, snowboarding every day, and you guys had these ad campaigns that I believe were you and Stick were the drivers of it, where it would be a 2-page spread. On one side of the spread would be an overflowing toilet full of shit, and then on the next page it would say like, hope it dumps in your town today, or one side would be OJ on the 405 freeway, and then the next page would be have a killer run today. And to me, that was like the coolest thing that was going on. That whole ad campaign blew my mind. Did you guys hear a lot of shit for it?
We did. That whole ad campaign came out of the drive back from Mount Hood. We went to like our summer sales meeting with like the reps down at Hood. And on the way back, we were like, we've got good riders. They're fucking awesome. But like, everybody's got good riders. And every ad campaign was the same. It was like piece of product, riding shot, name, brand. Yeah. And we were like, how do you fucking stand out when everything looks exactly the same? What could we do? Something has to go. And what would you at least expect to go would be the riding shot. But magazines are full editorial with other riding shots, so we could get rid of that and then do the comparison side-by-side thing. And we tried to break it down to its most simplest form and just being like the comparison of the two things. And the first one was the back in black That whole concept kind of blew up and grew from there. And that, in fact, that poop, if you want to talk about a poop story, we needed to shoot the crap in that toilet.
Yeah.
And you couldn't Photoshop it. It was like, it didn't look realistic when we tried to Photoshop it. So Styx knew of this like place that sells porcelain, like sinks and toilets and stuff. And to show you what kind of porcelain you could get in this toilet, they gave you like a miniature toilet. So you could take it to where your room and be like, does it look good in the room? Whatever. And he's like, now we just need someone to crap in it. And so what are we going to do? And take a photo of it. And it didn't have to be a high-res photo because it's only like, 3 inches tall or something like that. But anyway, I was like, I'll take it home and do it. So I took it home to the bathroom. What seems so easy was so difficult. I tried pooping it. I tried everything. This sounds so gross, but I tried pooping in a spoon and putting it in the thing. But then you get like, it doesn't have the right consistency, like a log that falls out. So you got to clean that out. Eventually, like long story short, is like I had to get the aim right, but pooping it in the bathtub. You're pooping and peeing at the same time, so the pee's like going into the bathtub, and then finally got the poop to land in the right spot, and then ended up shooting it, like gagging the whole time. And yeah, anyway.
That was a great ad campaign, and I loved it. It was amazing. And when I first got to K2, I was also in K2 North. So it was like Moro, Ride, K2 Skate, and K2 Kickboard were all in that little area. And the first day I got there, I was like, hey, to Dean and Barrett, they were my hiring managers. I was like, hey, man, I need to find those 2 Ride guys. And I didn't know it was 2 guys. I need to find the Ride guy that created these ads. And I want to tell him thank you. We looked at them in the shop all last year and we thought they were amazing. And all the skate guys told me, hey, the Ride guys hate us. You don't want to go upstairs. They do not like us. Don't go up there. But if you do, the guys that did it are up this flight of stairs. So I walk up, kind of shy. I'm like, hey guys, just want to let you know, I spent the last year in a ski shop and I looked at your ads. They were awesome. And without hesitation, you guys were like high-fiving me. You threw me a t-shirt that said, fuck the ferry. And I walked down to the skate group. I'm like, those guys are awesome, man. They were so cool. Look at the t-shirt they gave me. And my whole skate group was like, they gave you one of those t-shirts? Like it was the most coveted thing ever.
They were.
The fuck the ferry t-shirt. How did that come about? You guys making a t-shirt that says fuck the ferry when you rode the ferry every day.
That was one of those things, like pushing the K2 button like as much as we could. It was like, we didn't make that many. We made like 12 of them or something like that. And it was really small in the front, but that ended up leading to the Fuck Vegas shirt for SIA later on. But that was awesome. You got one. I could totally space that. But yeah, there was not that many of those things. I had mine forever and they just wore out. But like ideally, we were like, let's not ride the ferry, but you had to ride the ferry. At the end of the day, it was so rad. Because when K2 finally moved off of Vashon, it lost all that like camaraderie between people.
Community, yeah.
It was such a rad community vibe. You made you like come together and like on summers on the way back to town, everybody's sitting on the back deck with the soaking in the sun.
Yeah, and I was going to bring this up later in the podcast, but I might as well just say it now. When Robert Markovitz decided to move the company off Vashon Island, he did it to have an easier commute for himself. There was no reason other than that. He could save the company a little bit of money in shipping, but really, we own the building on Vashon, and he didn't want to commute to Vashon Island, but he told everyone that the reason that he was moving the company off was to get better talent in Seattle, which is an insult to every single person in that room. Was like, oh, you're going to get better people. But really, riding that ferry meant that you were committed, that you're going to put an hour and 15 minutes in each way every day because you love this brand, and you weren't going to get better talent in Seattle. You're going to get better talent on Vashon because people were going to put that time in because they loved it. And the CEO was making a shit ton of money. Sure, he wanted an easier commute because he didn't have to do what we did. But it was a totally different time and place. And from 2000 to like 2005, I feel like Ride was on fire. It's like you guys still had the riders that kept the brand image. The art was always on point. And with your role, are you spending like 50 hours a week cranking out graphics? Or is it a combination of that and then traveling to China to make sure the graphics are on point?
More of the first part. Like we spent so much time doing the graphics and hours weren't a thing at all. It was just hustling around. I mean, catching the ferry was the biggest deal, so you had to get it to the ferry on time. But sometimes during catalog season we were sleeping there, so we would never even take the ferry until the 2 weeks we finished the catalog. But yeah, there was only sometimes we were over in China. I was only in China like once a year for a week or two.
And when you first started going there, I mean, what's that like? Because I never went to China. I didn't take advantage of all the opportunities that were put in front of me, unfortunately. China was one of them. I was like, I could have gone, but I didn't. Was it one of those things when you go on your first trip, like you're traveling there solo, you have to figure out how to get everywhere in China, and then you get to this factory and it's just a totally weird experience?
I went there with Styx the first time and he'd already been there. He knew his way around. So it wasn't like I was there on my own trying to figure stuff out, but it was an eye-opener. I'd been to not so great places, and China was like top of the list for some not so great places. The places we went to, we fly into Hong Kong. Hong Kong was badass. But then once you go across the border into not non-Hong Kong China, it was nuts.
And I mean, you eat like baby birds because you have to appease factory workers, right? Like when the owner of the factory wants to take you out, you're kind of doing whatever he wants, right? For the most part.
Yeah, although I never went on the... They would go to this one restaurant called the Pet Shop.
Okay.
And it's like you literally pick out your dinner and then they take it away and cook it and bring it back to you. I never went there. But we would go to some weird meat spots, and then there was always this thing called Jesus chicken, which was like crucified chicken on the side. And then the smell of durian fruit. Have you ever had durian?
No.
It is gnarly. There's two things that stink super bad over in China. Durian and stinky tofu. And they kind of have like similar smells, but kind of distinct smells also. But my first trip to China, I didn't know what it was. I'm like, fucking China stinks when you get downtown. And then on the next trip over, I read this article about this fruit that was being banned, in subways and all these places around the world. And it was durian. I'm like, oh my God, you guys ever heard of this? And they're like, yeah, that's that spiky shit you see on the corners in China. Anytime you smell something, look for the durian stand. So you look around, they look like jackfruit. They got like spikes all over.
Yeah.
But they are so rot. Like it smells like a sewer. It's disgusting. And it's like a delicacy.
Huh.
But we ended up getting a durian fruit juice one time at a restaurant just to see if maybe the fruit itself tastes different than it smells. It's the same. Yeah, I mean, you try the juice, you're gagging, you're like, this is fucking gross.
Weird. Well, eventually K2 moves off of Vashon Island, which we kind of talked about. And I think that's around when your time at K2 ends the first time around, right around there. You go work with Stick over at Department of Energy. That has to be pretty cool because you're working on a lot of different stuff. More, I would think, building POP fixtures and different things that you weren't doing at K2. It was not just graphic design. Did you enjoy switching that up?
To be honest, when I first started at Ride in the whole career thing, I was like, I'll be here for 2 years and then I'm leaving. I just was like, this is my opportunity to work in the snowboard industry and do a bunch of fun stuff. But like when I was graduating, all my peers were going to work for major advertising agencies in downtown, and I was at the top of that pack, and I was like, I could go do that, or I could go in the snowboard industry and make the same amount of money, at least starting out, and have all these badass experiences. But it was so fun, I never left. That was the hard part. So anyways, instead of 2 years, I was there for fucking like 10 years before I ended up jumping ship with Sticks and trying things out. It was like long overdue, and it was fun to test the waters out and see how it was on the other side. And unfortunately, the company we started Department of Energy up under didn't do so great.
And Uncle Robert comes calling to save the day after that, I feel like. Or Tim and Uncle Robert, or I don't know who does. But K2 is in need of some graphic direction, I feel like. I mean, there's a lot of great, talented people there, but there's no real direction. And do they come and recruit you to be like, hey, Fank, we want you to lead all of our graphic design? And we're going to create this area called the Sandbox, and you can be the point man at the Sandbox, and we want to bring you in. Is that kind of how that happens?
From the way I understand it is that the company that owned us wasn't doing so good. And so there wasn't going to be money to like keep the design side of it going.
Okay.
This was totally a surprise to me. I had no idea. I'd only been gone for like 6 months.
And you probably thought you were in like going into a good business that you don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, totally. And I wasn't necessarily like putting my neck out because I was under, Sticks was still my boss. And I was like, I wasn't answering. I was just answering to him. So I got this call from Robert, and I was getting married at the time. And Robert's like, hey, the company that you're working for is not going to be in business in a year. I want you to come back, work for K2 for this salary, do this. I want you to start an internal agency under the K2 umbrella. And essentially he brought me back because they didn't have anybody in-house to do the Olympics. Like the Vancouver Olympics was going on. And that was like a huge extra lift for everybody and all the brands, for all K2 brands. So anything under the K2 umbrella that was going to get K2 on it needed to be branded, laid out, all that stuff. And so they needed somebody to take care of it. And that was when he called me. And then that's when I came back.
They probably have to pay you a pretty penny to come back, which is probably a nice piece of leverage to have in your hand, or at least I hope they did. And when you're back at K2, you're working on everything from Olympic stuff to skate stuff to ride stuff to line stuff to snowshoe stuff. Do you like the diversity of everything where you're kind of switching stuff every day almost?
I did. Yeah, totally. Like originally I was like kind of scoffed at it in my brain, I think. But then it turned out to be such a good experience. Like awesome people, and the product and the variation of stuff was so good. It was killer. But being able to work on more three-dimensional product, not just like a top sheet and a base. Like actually, like, one of the coolest projects was like inline skates. the K2 inline skates was that's a super fun project because you got wheels, you got the frame, you got the boot, the soft good boot itself.
I mean, I remember when we started working with you on like the skate of the month thing.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, with some of the other designers, there'd need to be a lot of direction because, you know, we needed to make things that look cool. But with you, within like 2 days, you came up with 8 comps. I looked at them all and it was just like, we can all go to market with these right now. All of these are perfect. It made life as a marketer easy because it's like the designers can design, the marketers can kind of sell it. And with that one, those were the coolest looking fitness inline skates that were ever made that no one bought because we didn't sell them inline, unfortunately. But it was really cool to work with you because I had never worked with a designer that could turn around and there was no ego or anything like, Mike, you like these or not? I don't care if you do or not. And it was like, actually, I like every single thing that you did here, and it's going to be hard for me to cut one because everything's great. And the beauty of working with you is that you were so humble. It was like, if I told you something sucked, which I never ever did, you wouldn't have cared. You'd have been like, cool, we'll throw that one away and go ahead. But you were the boss, which is pretty awesome because when you're working with someone who's the boss, that is that humble and that really cool to work with, it makes life a lot easier. So one thing that's strange that I found with K2, and given you were outside of Ride's design at this point because you were doing the sandbox and you're doing a lot of different design for K2, is there's a point at K2 where K2 Snowboards and Ride Snowboards kind of became the same brand. I mean, you look at the marketing, it was like the logos were almost identical. Everything was the same. It was like, how stupid is this? And really, it's not K2's fault because K2 was doing what they always were doing. They were selling to everyone. K2 is a brand for the masses. Ride was a brand that was for like the dirtbag people in like the early 90s, and then they kind of came a little bit to the masses. But when the brands get to be so close to each other, are there internal conversations of, hey, we need to distinguish our brands from each other? And are you involved in those conversations?
I don't want to say if I was involved with the decision making as much as we had these conversations all the fucking time.
I mean, it was obvious to everyone that they were doing the same shit, right?
Yeah, and it started down. I remember like being more so involved in like, holy shit, we're working with the exact same materials. I was like, we can't work with the same materials and be different brands. If you give us like a palette of like 3 colors and you have to use both brands have to stick with those 3 colors and you're making a base, you have to use 2 colors, so you're both going to use the 3rd color too, or just, I mean, there was no rules involved. I was like, we should get together at the beginning of the year and have like a draft essentially for colors and be like, okay, you get first pick color, you get second pick, something to totally make sure that we do not cross pollinate at all. But there's none of that. We fully cross pollinated every single thing, even people at some point. But yeah, they dwindled everything down. At the end of the day, corporations are about saving money, and they dwindle everything down to like cut people, put people on 2 jobs, and to the last point where it's at the very end, there's like just a couple people on their individual brand, but everything else, people are like doing both brands.
Yeah.
Customer service, design, or engineering. It was crazy.
And when we look at your role at the end of your K2 time, like we said, it's line, it's snowshoes, it's skate, it's just about everything. What are you most proud of? Is there one product at your K2 time or ride time that you look at and you're like, that was fucking awesome and I really enjoyed that time?
Oh my God. Like, honestly, the ad campaign that you talked about is probably like the best. I would say that's probably the most memorable thing that we'll be known for. I mean,
the ideation had to be so fun.
Yeah, we had so many graphics and so many graphics that were like time specific. They were cool in that moment, but then you look at them now, they're so dated. But that ad campaign probably stood out as one thing that will be around for a long time, I think. I mean, that idea worked out great.
Yeah, it's perfect. And around 2013 is the time that Jason Leventhal is going to leave Line Skis to create his new company, J Skis. Jason is aware of you as being the humble yet creative force behind everything at K2, I feel like, and he wants you to be part of his brand. But he can't pay you what K2 is going to pay you. Do you have to take a huge pay cut to go start with Jason? And then does he give you an ownership piece of the brand too, to be like, hey, you're going to come work with me? Because he realizes your talent and realizes that he can't do it without a creative force like yourself.
Yeah. But it actually goes back a little bit further because he and I got put on Planet Earth, which was a brand that was under the K2 umbrella. And I remember with Line, he'd come out to the island and I ended up giving him a ride. He was like walking on the ferry and I was like, dude, hop in. And I gave him a ride out to the facility that day. But anyway, later on, we got both put on the Planet Earth brand, reviving that. So essentially they could sell it off later. They made us like wrap it up in a pretty package.
Sorry, Chris Miller.
Yeah, seriously. So that they could sell it off later, which, it kind of felt bad being involved in such a badass history. And then, just They didn't tell us what they were doing. We were like, let's revive this thing and it'll be a badass brand under the K2 umbrella. But, I think the writing was on the wall from the beginning that it was just being built up to sell off. But he and I got to talk a lot during that whole project. I remember every time we'd get together, we'd be like, I'm going to leave and start do something. And I was like, fuck, what's going to be? Like, you should try to buy full tilt boots or, like any of these things. Anyway, long story short, eventually he called me up and said, hey, I'm leaving for sure. Do you want to jump ship with me, start this company up for a 3-year guaranteed contract at like 45% of what I was making for 2 weeks a month. So it was like 70 hours a month at 45% pay. So it wasn't, I was guaranteed a small paycheck, but not a lot, but to have 6% of the company after 3 years. We'd already been talking about leaving. I just never had like a clear jumping point. And this was like, this is freaking awesome. Like I guaranteed a paycheck and I get to leave and experiment with freelance. But at the time, my buddies, Corey and Brandon, had left and had started this company called Mystery Made, which is an awesome little clothing company and shop. And they let me like jump in with them, not ownership wise, but jump in and
you were like a coworker in their space.
I was a coworker. Yeah. Co-working space with them, which was so cool. And that worked out so good. It was just perfect opportunity for me to do it.
So do you work your 3 years with Jay there and start helping build that brand and realize that after 3 years, Jay's still not in the position to pay you enough? And is that why you have to go to REI, just because you have to make money? You got a family, like you can't just stay with Jay for 45% of your pay the whole time. So you go to REI and you still are a part owner in Jay Skis and you might help out here and there, but you're a full-time REI guy as well?
Yeah. Like every year we were kind of scraping by. It was like Jay's like super savvy businessman.
Yeah.
For me, I would have been so panicked, but like for him, he knew like how long it was going to take to build this thing, exactly the numbers we needed to hit. And I was just kind of like making the graphics. And every time I'd call him, be like, dude, is it happening? Is it happening? We'd sell like 10 pairs of skis or something like that. I'd be like, is it happening? He's like, it's happening. I think it's happening. And then, it never got smaller. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And every time I was stressed out, like, is it happening? Like, what's the future like? What's this going to look like in a couple of years or whatever? And he was like, don't worry about it, man. We got this. It's happening. It's happening. And then sure enough, it fucking took off. But after 3 years, when that initial investment and contract was up, it wasn't big enough to be sustainable for me financially. And I got this old buddy I used to work with, Scott Mosier, and he is a super talented designer, and he had been working at REI for a bit, and they needed some help. They actually needed like an in-house freelancer. So he, hit me up and was like, do you want to go do this for a little bit? And I was like, that sounds great. So I went in and, I told Jay this was going to be the end. They got to find somebody else to cover because they couldn't afford a full-time designer. And he found Tim Clayton, who's a badass designer too. Tim kind of took over. And then I worked for REI under Scott Mosier. It ended up being a full-time gig for a couple of years.
And what's funny is Scott Mosier was a K2 guy.
Yeah.
And at K2, he's like an unassuming guy who kind of looks like he could be a yogi or something, this like dreads and big, huge beard. But he was always like not the boss. He was a role player. But it sounds like at REI, like that dude is the guru. When Scott said something, that whole company is like, ah.
He is like the best storyteller. And he is so fucking smart. It's insane. You see the gears turning and he takes a moment to think about it and it all just like gels together in his head. And you're like, everybody just rallies around his like storytelling for that season. He's such a good marketer, such a good like designer.
And I guess that he was probably totally underutilized at K2 with his role.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
100%.
Which is crazy because I've heard stories about him at REI where he's like the guru there. And it's like at K2, he's just a role player, and he seemed happy with that. But it's pretty cool to see all the people at K2 everywhere they go. It seems like they do really well. And when you're at REI, it's a different experience than J Skis or Ride or even K2. Because at K2 and all those places, it was the wild, wild west. You could do whatever the fuck you wanted. At REI, there's a lot of checks and balances and a lot of no's, I would think. Is that frustrating as a designer? Or do you just understand what the customer wants?
It wasn't a lot of no's as much as it was crazy. There's so many checks and balances. That was the thing. It wasn't so much the no's. It was just the process to get anything to market was an extended timeline with a lot of people involved. So it wasn't so much a no as it was like I don't want to say a whittling down. But it was kind of tough because when I first started, my perspective of REI was that it was like they were like knocking off the brands they were carrying and dumbing them down and selling for cheaper. Totally not the case. Once you're in-house REI, you're like, holy shit, this product is just as good, if not better, It just has a generic brand, if that makes sense. It's not like North Face we're climbing. They're an everything outdoor brand, but the teams involved in all their product is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people and so much engineering of the product that goes on there. I would think that everything's quality stuff, but it's just more cookie cutter and more commercial per se than the stuff that you've worked on where it's more counterculture and more fun. So you got to really appease the REI customer who's also an REI owner or shareholder, and it's a whole weird world over there, I feel like. And if you're an REI supporter, you die with REI. That's like your favorite thing in the world. But Jay eventually gets to a point where he can bring you back, right? Where he's just like, hey, Fank, we've got the money now. We're going to bring you back. It's going to be you and me against the world. And when does that happen? Like 2016, 17?
Oh, my God. When was that?
It doesn't even matter what year. A few years back?
Yeah, a few years back. But anyway, so REI was moving to Bellevue. They announced they were going to move to Bellevue.
Yeah.
If you lived in West Seattle, and the Bellevue commute was insane. I did the commute one time just to see if it was sustainable. It was going to be like an extra almost 1,000 hours a year just on the road. It was like 600 and, I guess.
That's crazy.
Half that. And I was like, there's no way I'm doing this. And then at that same time, Jay called up and was like, I need somebody. We had another company that we just acquired called Forefront from Matt Sturbins, and we need a full-time designer. Do you want to come back? And it was crazy because I literally, to this day, I've never been on an interview. I did an interview for the Ride job. I never interviewed for the REI job. I never interviewed for Jay. It's like the jobs just kind of like flow. I could speak because I don't really chase shit either. I just kind of like let it happen. And the timing lined up perfectly for Jay. Yeah, and it worked out perfect because like I went back to work and the pandemic hit and it was like, holy shit, I'm glad I'm not doing that commute anymore.
Yeah.
Kids at home and who knows what was going to happen with working remotely for these companies. And come to find out, I go back to work for Jay and then REI doesn't move. they end up selling their facility. Everybody went remote.
But when you look at it, now you're at Jay and you're running all the graphics, I would think. So you're not only designing skis yourself, but you're managing other designers in their process of designing skis, I would think, because you guys have a lot of guest designers. And for you, you're one of those dudes who, like I've said a bunch of times, you're very humble. You don't throw your work out in front of other people's face. You just kind of have a creative direction. You show it to people. Everybody usually loves what you have, and it's usually a win. That's why you don't have to interview, because you understand the customer and you get stuff done. But when you're working with other designers and you have to manage them, you're not a dude that is like a dick ever. I've never seen you get mad. And is it hard for you to sometimes make people stay on time for deadlines? And when you have to be a dick, how does Fank do that?
I don't have an answer for that at all. I have no idea. Like, I think I've been a dick sometimes, but I don't know. I'm not sure how I come off. When it comes to deadlines, it's like literally just fucking working until it's done.
Right.
Most of my career was without family, so you stay as late as you want and until it gets done. And then if it doesn't get done, it's like you've shown that you've put in the fucking effort to get it done. And so something else happened. It was bad planning on somebody else's part. I've rarely been in charge of a calendar or a budget or anything like that. So I know what I can get done like instinctively and be like, yeah, that's doable, or fuck no, it's impossible.
But a calendar or budget is one thing. But when you know that the ski graphic is due on the 12th and it's the 14th and you still don't have it and you have to go back to your artist, and artists, for the most part, they're not so worried about deadlines as they are about creating great art. And sometimes deadlines are more important than great art. Have you had that situation where you've had to get on people? Be like, hey, I need this now.
I've definitely been in the situation where I've had to like tell somebody where it's not a go anymore. But at that point, then you got to scramble to get it done because you're already halfway through the process with that person. Is it worth it going that half to full, or do you just cancel completely and then do it all on your own? And I've definitely been in that situation where you're not fucking doing it all on your own. And it works out horrible, usually. John O'Connor.
Yeah.
Joe O'Connor told me one time, this is like way later on in my career, but I remember like I was complaining about like what you were just saying about like timelines, and they're expecting us to do this fucking many graphics in this amount of time. There's no way we're going to be able to hit that deadline, because every year K2 would just move a deadline up, move a deadline up, move a deadline up, and you could never hit it. It was like you're constantly chasing the dragon, just trying to get that fucking impossible deadline. And I remember complaining to O'Connor, I think he was like sales manager at the time, and he's like, it's because you guys keep doing it. It was like, as long as you keep showing them you can do it, they're going to push you even further. It was like an epiphany for some reason. I was like, oh, fuck. So if we don't get it done, then they won't push us even further. I mean, I was like, not that I was being lazy, but I'm like, it takes you from going, like 120% to just back to 90%, maybe life is more important than this arbitrary deadline.
Yeah.
Because, inevitably, we'd never hit a deadline, and they would always make it work somehow. So it's like, shit, what are we busting our ass for?
Well, at this point in the podcast, it's time for something that I call Inappropriate Questions.
Oh.
And this is a time where I get someone that you know to ask you 3 questions, and they can be anything. In this case, I got the person that brought you into action sports, the guy that brought you into snowboarding, Mike Stiskell, a.k.a. Stick, to ask you these inappropriate questions. And I'm going to play question number 1 from Stick for you right now.
Fank, what's your favorite cocktail to have when you're visiting New York City?
I don't even like olives. My wife loves olives, and I hate olives. But for some reason, when we were on work trips in New York, we would order these, like, we would just order dirty martinis. And it was like Patrick Lawrence, who was a rep of ours, his wife, a fellow rep, Michelle Lawrence, she's awesome. She would always show us around New York. She was like local knowledge. So she would take us out and show us around. And I don't know, we'd always get crazy at night after spending all day in the city, like running around. And then the nights would be extra crazy. And for some reason, I remember like got to be a joke about like, well, how dirty do you want your martini? The joke was like, if this martini was any dirtier, these olives would be on a string. And that was like it was just a bad, very dirty joke.
All right, we're going to go with question number 2.
Have you ever won anything playing pool in Vegas?
I have no idea.
All right, so Fank is thinking here. He has no idea. And this is when Inappropriate Questions goes wrong, when he can't think of the answer. What's the biggest thing you've ever won? Like whether it's a snowboard at a movie premiere or a new car at a Big Brothers Foundation dinner. Have you won anything cool in your life?
I won $800 playing craps just like last year with HO, like or with Hyperlight. I mean, yeah, random. That's the biggest thing I've ever won.
And are you not a gambler?
I'm not a gambler, right? Yeah, and I've never played craps. It was like, I asked Tommy Curtin to be like, dude, how do you play craps? And he showed me and just came out winning. I had no idea. It was nuts.
Nice. All right. Well, that will take care of Stick's inappropriate question number 2. We're going to go for his final inappropriate question.
Well, at the early days at Ride, Fank, can you explain to those non-subscribers what the Monday morning morale builder really was?
It was an email that it was almost all guys. I don't know how to approach this question. It was just scantily clad ladies, JPEGs that you would email the rep for us on Mondays, essentially. And people just kept asking to get added to the list. And we had this computer tech dude, Dave Durkee. The guy was crazy. He just gave us a folder of the material. And it was just like, and they were organized by the person. And it was like, you just email it out to the rep force and be like, happy Monday, fellas, or whatever. This is old days. I would definitely not be doing that right now.
I wouldn't do it right now either, but I'll let you know that the way I got my job at K2 was I interviewed and did all that stuff, but then there was a hiring freeze. So it took them a year to hire me, or like 8 months to hire me. But I had a friend who had this porn email chain, which is kind of like your Monday morning chain. And this guy would send the raunchiest stuff ever. So I asked the K2 dudes who were going to hire me. I knew they were going to hire me at some point. I'm like, hey guys, you want me to send you this stuff that I get on this list? It's pretty crazy. And they were like, yeah. And it was like the most disgusting, disturbing, terrible stuff ever. But I feel like sending them that every Monday got me my job. When the hiring freeze was lifted, I was flown out right away and everything happened. So while it was a different time, there was some camaraderie built off of some terrible stuff, unfortunately, that we don't do anymore. But at this point, Fank, we are done with Inappropriate Questions. We are done with your podcast. And, I've known you a long time. And while I didn't get to work with you until about 10 years into my K2 career, I feel like you were the easiest person to work with that delivered the best stuff. You were always smarter than me. You were always faster than me at stuff. And you always made me look good. And I think that was the beauty of you, is that you make a lot of people look good. You never take any of the credit yourself, and you always push it on other people. And that's something that while you're a leader, you're not a leader that's telling people what to do and being a dick about what to do. You're a leader by example and by propping other people up. And there's something to be said for that. You'll never be the guy posting shit about that you've done on social media saying, look at me, because that's not you. You're just the guy that gets great work done. Everybody appreciates it when it hits the marketplace, and you don't even care. You just get it done and move on to the next project. And there's something to be said for that. And I thank you for your time.
Well, dude, thank you. I feel like I've stood on a lot of shoulders in my time, like Brandon and Sticks and Jesse Federico. And there's so many people that are super talented. Andy McCabe, Jason Leventhal, Taylor, people that have helped me out. Like, I've stood on their shoulders. It's not the opposite.
So
So that was time with Fank, and he is such a cool guy. I'm not sure if it came off in the podcast, but he's one of those guys that's good at everything that he chooses to do. Art, obviously, but all action sports. He rips on a skateboard and a snowboard. He used to kill it on skis and inline skates. And I'm not sure if he surfs these days or not, but I'm willing to bet that if he does, he's pretty good. The coolest part of Fank is that he'll talk and act like he's not good at these things. He's just having fun. He's just such a humble dude. And when he does do something cool, in art or in life, he's quick to give credit to someone else. There is zero ego when it comes to Fank. I can't remember him ever posting any of his work on the internet or anything like that. He's just a regular dude who's super talented and has an awesome job. That's the podcast. Now it's time for the review of the week, and it's a 5-star review, and it comes from Gabe's Computer, and it's titled Top Tier. Here's the review. What a wonderful podcast, covering a wide array of athletes and ski industry experts. Always learning new information straight from the horse's mouth. Where most ski podcasts fail, this podcast shines. A revolving door of characters. Thank you for that review. It's rad to read, and I won't say most other ski podcasts fail. They're just different. I mean, I put a different level of research into my show than most podcasts on the planet. So I know the podcasts are going to be deep. But I also have a history with a lot of this stuff. I mean, from 2000 on, I was there, behind the scenes, seeing these athletes and their stories happen in real time. So between my personal experience and the work I put in each week to ensure you get a great show, that's what separates the Powell Movement shit from all the other crap that's out there. And I'm glad you recognize that. Thanks for the review. Please email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com with your mailing address, and I will send you a custom beanie. If you want a beanie, you can buy one on the website, or you can just submit a review. If I read it on the show, you qualify for that free beanie, so email me. So thank you everyone for listening, and please support my amazing sponsors who make this show happen. They are Hest, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Elon Skis, and Rollerblade. Have a great week, everyone.